Life has a way of feeling so certain, doesn't it? 11 years of marriage had taught me the rhythms of my life with Rebecca, the subtle dance of routines and compromises. Our house, with its creaky wooden floors and sunlit kitchen, was more than walls and a roof. It was a reflection of what I thought we'd built together. Trust, partnership, a shared dream of forever. Lately, though, things had begun to shift. Rebecca's laugh, once so full and warm, felt guarded. Her gaze darted away too often, and her phone, a device that had once been an afterthought, was now an extension of her hand. These were small things, easy to overlook if you weren't paying attention. But I was paying attention. It was a Wednesday morning when the first real crack appeared. A sliver of silver on the bathroom floor caught the sunlight as I stepped out of the shower. At first, I thought it was foil from one of the kids' granola bars, but when I bent to pick it up, my stomach twisted. A birth control pill packet backing, with a pill conspicuously missing. We hadn't needed birth control in years, not since my vasectomy. So why would Rebecca have this? I felt the cold edge of suspicion slicing through the warm haze of our life together. It was like spotting a leak in the roof during a storm. You know the damage is happening, but you don't want to believe it. For the rest of that day, I carried the weight of the discovery in my chest, a dull ache that refused to subside. That evening, I kissed Rebecca hello, the way I always did, but for the first time, I felt like I was kissing a stranger. She didn't notice my hesitation. Or maybe she did but didn't care. Either way, her smile seemed painted on, a facade hiding something I couldn't yet see. I resolved then and there to get to the bottom of it. This wasn't just about Rebecca. It was about my sanity, my family, my world. The days following my discovery were a haze. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Rebecca's every action seemed suspicious now. Her sudden, inexplicable absences, the way she guarded her phone like it held state secrets. I told myself I was overthinking, imagining problems that weren't there. But the birth control pill packet lingered in my thoughts like a splinter I couldn't dig out. I started watching her more closely, noticing things I hadn't before. Her phone never left her side. Even at home, it was either tucked into her pocket or placed screen down on the kitchen counter. She began to stay late at work more often, brushing off my concerns with the same excuse. Big project coming up. You know how it is. But I didn't know how it was. Rebecca worked in HR, not some high-stakes corporate job. There weren't deadlines so crucial they'd keep her out until 9 o'clock at night. I tried to talk myself out of my growing paranoia. Maybe she really was just busy. Maybe there was some other explanation for the birth control pills. But then came Friday. Rebecca had kissed me on the cheek that morning, told me she'd be home late because of a team dinner. I pretended not to care, but the knot in my stomach tightened as I watched her drive away. When I went into the bedroom to grab a sweater, I noticed her closet door slightly ajar. It wasn't like Rebecca to leave things in disarray. She was meticulous about her space. Something about that sliver of open door felt like an invitation, so I pulled it wide and stepped inside. That's when I found it. A small leather bag sat on the top shelf, zipped tight. I'd never seen it before. My curiosity overpowered my hesitation. Inside were items that didn't belong to the woman I knew. A short black dress, sheer stockings, and a pair of high heels that screamed anything but team dinner. At the bottom of the bag was a travel-sized bottle of perfume I didn't recognize and a box of condoms. I stared at the contents, my mind reeling. There was no denying it anymore. This wasn't just paranoia. Something was happening, something I was not a part of. I put everything back exactly as I found it, my hands trembling. For the first time in our 11 years of marriage, I felt like I was living with a stranger. When Rebecca came home that night, hours later than usual, she slipped into bed without a word. Her hair smelled faintly of the unfamiliar perfume from the bag. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, trying to reconcile the woman I'd built my life with and the one sneaking back into my bed. The next day, I made a decision. I needed answers. If Rebecca was betraying me, I wasn't going to confront her empty-handed. I had to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt. I started by installing a small GPS tracker under the rear bumper of her car. It was discreet enough that she'd never notice, and it would give me a way to follow her movements without arousing suspicion. Next, I set up a few hidden cameras around the house. One in the living room, disguised as an air purifier, and another in our bedroom, hidden in the corner of a bookshelf. I felt sick to my stomach doing it, like I was violating her privacy, but I told myself it was necessary. Finally, I bought a phone monitoring app. I didn't want to do it, but Rebecca's sudden attachment to her phone was too glaring to ignore. That night, while she was in the shower, I installed the app on her phone, careful not to leave any traces. With everything in place, all I could do was wait. For the next few days, I played the role of the oblivious husband. I laughed at her jokes, kissed her goodbye in the morning, and acted like I wasn't unraveling inside. Every night, I checked the tracker and the phone app, piecing together her movements and communications. Then, on Wednesday, I saw it. A text message to a number not saved in her contacts. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Same place." My blood ran cold. The reply came almost immediately, of course, counting down the minutes. It was signed M. I knew then that my suspicions were more than justified. Rebecca wasn't just distant. She was betraying me. That evening, when Rebecca left, claiming she was meeting friends for dinner, I followed her. The GPS tracker showed her car heading toward the outskirts of town, far from any restaurant. Her car pulled up to a secluded cabin near the woods. I parked down the road, heart pounding, and crept closer on foot. Through the window, I saw her, laughing, relaxed, and in the arms of another man. I couldn't see his face, but I didn't need to. The way she kissed him, the way they moved together, it was a level of intimacy I hadn't felt from her in months. I took out my phone and started recording. If Rebecca thought she could destroy our marriage and walk away unscathed, she was wrong. But I wasn't ready to confront her yet. Not here. Not like this. Instead, I turned and walked back to my car, my resolve hardening with every step. This wasn't just her betrayal. It was my awakening. And I wasn't going to let her rewrite the rules of our life without consequences. Driving back home felt surreal, like I was floating through someone else's life. My hands gripped the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The image of Rebecca in another man's arms replayed in my mind on an endless loop. When I got home, I locked myself in my office and reviewed the footage from the cameras. My hands trembled as I loaded the video from the bedroom. There it was, Rebecca, retrieving a small, sleek phone from the air vent above our bed. She typed furiously, her expression unreadable. I zoomed in, hoping to make out her messages, but the angle wasn't clear enough. What was clear, though, was the deliberate way she hid the phone when she was done, tucking it back into the vent like a precious secret. I noted the vent as my next target. That phone held answers I couldn't ignore. For the next 2 days, I collected evidence. The tracker showed Rebecca heading to the cabin twice more, both times staying for hours. The phone app mirrored messages between her and M, short exchanges that were sickeningly sweet. It wasn't just physical. They shared jokes, plans, and whispered promises. I felt like I was losing my mind, caught between heartbreak and fury. But I forced myself to stay calm, focused. I wasn't going to confront her until I had everything I needed. On Saturday morning, Rebecca said she was meeting friends for a girls' day. As soon as she left, I retrieved the phone from the vent. It was locked, but I'd anticipated that. With the cloning software I'd installed earlier, I was able to bypass her PIN and access everything. My stomach churned as I scrolled through the messages. The texts to M were explicit and emotional, a level of passion she hadn't shown me in years. But what hit me hardest were the photos. Rebecca smiling in the black dress from the leather bag, wrapped around the man I now knew was Mark, her coworker. It wasn't just the messages or photos. It was the casual way they planned their next rendezvous, the ease with which she lied about our life together. As I returned the phone to the vent, I felt an odd sense of calm. The evidence was indisputable. She couldn't explain this away, no matter how hard she tried. After Rebecca came home that evening, I kept my composure, pretending everything was normal. It was almost comical, the routine of it all. She walked through the door with a soft smile, setting her bag on the counter and asking how my day had been. "Fine," I said, forcing a neutral tone. "Yours?" She shrugged. "Busy, as always." "I'm exhausted." I nodded, keeping my eyes on the television, though I wasn't watching it. I could feel her moving around the house, first to the kitchen for a glass of water, then upstairs for her shower. Every step she took felt heavier than usual, as if the weight of her secrets was finally starting to press down on her. When she finally went to bed, I stayed in the living room, staring at my phone. My fingers hovered over the screen, heart pounding as I dialed the number I'd found earlier that day, Mark's wife. The line rang twice before a cautious voice answered. "Hello?" I swallowed hard, steadying my voice. "Hi," I said. "I'm sorry to call you out of the blue, but I think we need to talk. It's about Mark." There was a pause, and I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. Then came the sharp intake of breath. "Who is this?" I introduced myself, explaining that I was Rebecca's husband. My words felt clinical, detached, as I laid out the basics of what I had discovered. The texts, the secret phone, the trips to the cabin. I have evidence, I said finally, if you're willing to see it. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. I wondered if she was going to hang up, or scream, or deny everything. But instead, she let out a bitter, humorless laugh. "You're not the first to warn me," she said, her voice laced with exhaustion. "But I've never had proof. Mark's always been so careful." "Well, you do now," I replied. "I can send you the video, the messages, whatever you need." She sighed, and for the first time, her voice softened. "Thank you. I don't even know what to say. It's just, I guess I've been waiting for this, dreading it, but waiting." There was another pause before she spoke again, this time with more resolve. "What's your plan?" "I want to confront them," I said. "Together, if you're willing. They need to know they can't keep getting away with this." She agreed without hesitation. We spent the next few minutes coordinating, our voices calm but underlined by the shared anger and grief of two people who had been betrayed in the same cruel way. "I'll handle Mark," she said firmly. "You focus on Rebecca. Let's make sure they can't deny this when it's all laid out in front of them." We ended the call, and I leaned back on the couch, my head spinning. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of control. This wasn't just about catching them anymore. It was about reclaiming my life, about proving to myself that I deserved better than this betrayal. Rebecca had no idea what was coming. Rebecca always had an air of quiet confidence, a belief that she could charm her way out of anything. That confidence had turned to arrogance lately, a smugness that she wore like armor. She thought her lies were untouchable, her secrets buried so deep no one could reach them. But she had underestimated me. On Sunday morning, I sent the kids to my mother's for the night. I needed the house to be quiet, focused. I told Rebecca it would be nice for us to have dinner together, just the two of us, something we hadn't done in months. She smiled, her expression soft, almost tender, as if this was just another moment in our happy marriage. "Sounds perfect," she said, wrapping her arms around me for a quick hug before heading off to run errands. The sweetness in her voice made my stomach churn. She had no idea what was waiting for her. As Rebecca busied herself through the day, I finalized the plan with Mark's wife, Linda. She was sharp and relentless, a woman scorned but determined to regain control. Her bitterness toward Mark was palpable, and it fueled her willingness to expose the truth. "I'll keep him busy until you're done," she said over the phone. "He has no idea what's coming, and frankly, I don't care how messy it gets." That evening, I set the table with care, candles, her favorite wine, the works. I wanted no distractions when the time came. Rebecca arrived home just before dinner, her hair slightly tousled and her cheeks flushed as if she'd been running errands all day. "Wow," she said, taking in the setup. "You're really pulling out all the stops tonight." "I thought we could use a little reset," I said, forcing a smile. Dinner was a strange dance of small talk. Rebecca told me about her day, details about running into an old friend at the store, some story about a sale she found on winter coats for the kids. I nodded, pretending to listen, while my mind ticked through the steps of the plan. After the dishes were cleared and the candles burned low, I told her, "Let's move to the living room. There's something I want to show you." Her eyes lit up, curiosity dancing in them. "What is it?" "You'll see." She followed me to the couch, wineglass in hand, and sank into her usual spot. I placed my laptop on the coffee table and opened it, pulling up the file I'd queued hours earlier. "What's this?" she asked, her tone light, as if she expected a funny video or some surprise trip announcement. I hit play. The screen lit up with the footage of her and Mark at the cabin. The angle was perfect, the video clear. Rebecca's laughter filled the room, but this time, it was hollow and damning. Her smile faltered instantly. She leaned forward, staring at the screen as if willing the image to change. I saw the color drain from her face, her fingers tightening around the stem of her wineglass. "What?" she began, her voice barely a whisper. "Care to explain?" I asked, keeping my tone low and steady, though my chest felt like it might burst from the pressure. Rebecca's mouth opened and closed like she was searching for words that didn't exist. Her hands trembled as she placed the wineglass on the table, and she looked at me with wide, panicked eyes. It's not what it looks like," she stammered. "Don't insult me, Rebecca," I said, cutting her off. "It's exactly what it looks like. You've been lying to me, sneaking around with Mark while pretending everything was fine. Well, it's not fine. Not anymore." Tears welled up in her eyes as she started to shake her head. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. It didn't mean anything, I swear. Please, we can fix this." I let out a bitter laugh, the sound surprising even me. Fix this? How, exactly? By pretending it never happened? By sweeping it under the rug, so you can keep doing whatever the hell you want? She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Her touch, once so familiar, now felt foreign, almost repulsive. It's over, I said firmly. I've already spoken to Mark's wife. She knows everything. Tomorrow, we're confronting both of you, and I'm not letting this slide. Rebecca's face crumbled, and the tears she'd been holding back finally spilled over. Please, she sobbed, her voice breaking. Don't do this. I made a mistake. One mistake. Don't throw everything away. I stood, needing to put distance between us. You made your choice, I said quietly. Now I'm making mine. Her sobs grew louder as I walked toward the hallway. What do you mean? She called after me. I've already filed for divorce, I said without turning around. You can stay here for now, but I'm moving out. We'll discuss custody arrangements for the kids soon. The weight of her betrayal pressed down on me as I climbed the stairs to our bedroom. Her cries echoed through the house, but I didn't stop to comfort her. That part of my life was over. Morning brought no relief. The sun rose as it always did, casting its golden light over the house, but inside, the weight of the previous night's events hung heavy in the air. I woke to the sound of muffled crying downstairs. Rebecca. Part of me wanted to avoid her entirely, but I knew she wouldn't let it go. Sure enough, as I stepped into the kitchen, she was there, her eyes red and puffy, clutching a steaming mug of coffee like it was her last lifeline. Good morning, she said softly, her voice trembling. I didn't respond, instead moving to pour myself a cup. The silence was thick, unbearable. Finally, she broke it. Please, she began, her voice cracking. We need to talk. I need you to understand. I turned to face her, leaning against the counter. Understand what, Rebecca? That you threw away 11 years of marriage for. What? A fling? A coworker? You made your choices, and now you have to live with them. Her face crumpled, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. It wasn't like that, she insisted. It wasn't about you, or the kids, or… Stop, I interrupted, my tone sharp. Don't tell me it wasn't about me. Don't tell me it wasn't about the life we built together. You made it about me the moment you decided to lie, to cheat, to risk everything we had for whatever this was. She started to speak again, but I held up a hand. I'm done talking, Rebecca. I'll be out of the house by the end of the week. The lawyer will handle the rest. The words seemed to drain the fight out of her. She slumped into the chair, her hands shaking as she gripped her mug. I left the room, grabbing my keys and jacket, and walked out the door without another word. That afternoon, I met Linda, Mark's wife, at the cabin. She was already there when I arrived, her car parked discreetly down the road. The look in her eyes as she stepped out of her car mirrored my own, a mix of anger, hurt, and determination. Are you ready for this? She asked, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling beneath the surface. As ready as I'll ever be, I replied. We approached the cabin together, our footsteps crunching on the gravel. My heart pounded in my chest, but my resolve was firm. This wasn't just about confronting them. It was about reclaiming the narrative, about taking back the control they had stolen from us. Inside, Mark and Rebecca were sitting close on the couch, their heads snapping up in unison as the door creaked open. The look of shock on their faces was almost satisfying. Linda? What are you doing here? Mark stammered, standing quickly. Rebecca's eyes darted between me and Linda, her face pale. What's going on? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Linda wasted no time. What's going on is that we know, she said coldly, her gaze fixed on Mark. We know everything. The lies, the sneaking around, the disgusting betrayal. And we're done letting you get away with it. I stepped forward, my voice calm but firm. You both thought you could rewrite the rules, that we wouldn't notice. But we did. And now it's time to face the consequences. Mark tried to speak, his words tumbling out in a panicked rush. It wasn't serious. I swear. It didn't mean anything. Rebecca joined in, her voice desperate. Please, it wasn't like that. It was a mistake, a horrible mistake. We were going to stop, save it, Linda snapped, cutting them both off. We're not here for your excuses. We're here to tell you that this ends now. You don't get to lie your way out of this. Their apologies felt hollow, their promises meaningless. I could see it in their eyes. They were scrambling, grasping for anything to soften the blow. But it was too late for that. You destroyed what we had, I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. And there's no coming back from that. I'm done. Rebecca, I'll handle the arrangements for the divorce. You'll hear from my lawyer soon. Linda stepped closer to Mark, her expression icy. And you'll be hearing from mine as well. I suggest you start packing your things. The silence that followed was deafening. Mark and Rebecca sat frozen, their world crashing down around them as Linda and I turned and walked out. As I drove away, the cabin fading in the rearview mirror, I felt an unexpected sense of relief. The confrontation hadn't been easy, but it was necessary. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a long, painful process. But in that moment, I knew one thing for certain. I was free. Free to rebuild my life. Free to move forward. Free to leave behind the lies and betrayal that had tried to define me. And that freedom, hard one as it was, felt like the first step towards something better. The days after the confrontation unfolded like a dream you couldn't wake up from, fuzzy at the edges yet sharp in their emotional impact. There was no more yelling, no more pleading face to face. It was as if Rebecca and I had tacitly agreed to a ceasefire, though the silence between us was its own kind of warfare. Rebecca stayed in the house, which had once been our sanctuary but now felt like a battlefield. I packed the essentials, clothes, toiletries, a few cherished keepsakes, and left without ceremony, driving to the small apartment I'd rented across town. It wasn't much, 2 bedrooms, a tiny kitchen, and a living room that doubled as a dining space. But it was mine, and in that, I found a flicker of solace. That first night alone was the hardest. The apartment felt empty in a way that went beyond the lack of furniture. It was a hollow space, filled with echoes of what I had lost. I lay on the lumpy mattress I'd bought that morning, staring at the ceiling as the reality of my new life sank in. The kids noticed the change immediately. At 9 and 6, they weren't old enough to understand the complexities of betrayal, but they were perceptive enough to feel the tension. "Why are you staying at Grandma's?" my daughter, Sophie, asked over dinner one night. I hesitated, searching for the right words. "It's just for a little while," I said, forcing a smile. "Mom and I need some time to figure things out, but we both love you very much. That will never change." She nodded, but the worry in her eyes was unmistakable. Jack, my younger son, was less vocal, but he clung to me more tightly than usual during our bedtime routine. I did everything I could to shield them from the chaos. Mornings became an anchor of routine. Breakfast together, a quick review of their homework, and then the drive to school. In the evenings, we read their favorite books or worked on puzzles, small acts of normalcy that helped keep their world intact. But beneath the surface, I was unraveling. Rebecca's behavior in the days following was a pendulum swing of emotions. One day, I'd wake up to a string of texts, paragraphs long, where she poured out her remorse. "I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. Please, let's talk. We can fix this. I'll do anything." Other times, her messages took on an accusatory tone. "You're throwing everything away. 11 years, and you're just giving up? How could you do this to me? To us?" I didn't respond to most of them. What was there to say? Her apologies felt hollow, her accusations misplaced. I wasn't the one who had shattered our marriage. On one particularly hard day, she showed up at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door to find her standing there, clutching a stack of envelopes and a tissue crumpled in her hand. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I sighed, stepping aside to let her in. She perched on the edge of the couch, the envelopes trembling in her hands. "These are letters," she began, her voice wavering. "Letters I've written to you over the past week. I didn't know how else to tell you how sorry I am. I didn't take them. Rebecca, it's not about being sorry. It's about trust. And that's gone. I can't live my life waiting for the next betrayal." She broke down, tears spilling onto her cheeks. "I don't know what else to do. I can't lose you. I can't lose our family." Her words hit me like a hammer, but I held my ground. "You already lost me when you chose someone else. I didn't do this, Rebecca. You did." She left soon after, leaving the letters on the coffee table. I didn't open them. I couldn't. The apartment slowly began to feel less like a temporary refuge and more like home. I hung pictures of the kids on the walls, arranged their favorite books on the shelves in their room, and bought a secondhand bike for Sophie to ride when she visited. I poured my energy into creating a space where they could feel safe, even if it wasn't the house they were used to. We started new traditions: pancakes for dinner on Friday nights, a weekly trip to the park, board games after homework. These moments, as small as they were, became the foundation of my new life. They reminded me why I was doing this, why I had chosen to leave instead of staying in a broken marriage. Rebecca didn't understand that. She saw my departure as abandonment, as giving up. But she was wrong. I wasn't giving up. I was choosing myself, my kids, and a life where I didn't have to live in doubt. And for the first time in years, that choice felt like freedom. Mark's wife, Linda, wasn't as measured in her response. She kicked Mark out of the house that very night and immediately filed for divorce. Unlike me, she had no interest in co-parenting, as their children were already grown. Mark, predictably, fell apart. His professional life suffered. Rumors of his infidelity spread through the office, and his once stellar reputation crumbled. I can't say I felt sorry for him. He made his bed, and now he was lying in it, alone. Rebecca tried to distance herself from him after the confrontation, but by then, it was too late. The damage was done, and whatever fantasy they'd built together had shattered under the weight of reality. The divorce process was brutal but necessary. Rebecca's initial reaction to my filing was to fight, accusing me of overreacting and trying to demand more than her fair share of our assets. But my lawyer was sharp, and the evidence I'd gathered left little room for negotiation. We eventually settled on joint custody of the kids, with me as the primary caretaker. Rebecca would stay in the house temporarily, but we agreed to sell it and split the proceeds. It was bittersweet, packing up the life we'd built together. Every box felt like a chapter closing, every empty room a reminder of what we'd lost. But as painful as it was also liberating. The day I moved into my new apartment was both terrifying and exhilarating. It was small, just 2 bedrooms and a cramped kitchen, but it was mine. I decorated the kids' room with their favorite colors and filled it with their toys, determined to make it a space where they felt safe and loved. For the first time in years, I had space to breathe. I started going for runs around the lake near my apartment, rediscovering the quiet joy of solitude. I spent my evenings reading or tinkering with projects I'd put off for years. Slowly, I began to remember who I was before Rebecca's betrayal consumed my thoughts. Rebecca, meanwhile, struggled to adjust. Her attempts to repair our relationship became increasingly frantic, but I stood firm. I wasn't interested in rekindling what we'd lost. Trust, once broken, isn't easily mended, and her betrayal had cut too deep. She asked to meet one afternoon, claiming she wanted to talk about the kids. I reluctantly agreed, meeting her at a coffee shop near her office. "I know I messed up," she said, her voice trembling, "but I never stopped loving you. Doesn't that count for something?" I looked at her, trying to reconcile the woman in front of me with the one who had so casually destroyed our life together. "It counts for a lot," I said after a long pause, "but not enough to undo what you did." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't feel the satisfaction I thought I would. Just a dull ache, like an old wound reopening. Life didn't magically fall into place after the divorce. There were still moments of pain, of doubt, of wondering if I could have done something differently. But there were also moments of clarity, moments where I felt stronger than I ever had before. I poured myself into being the best father I could be, making every moment with my kids count. We built new traditions together: Sunday morning pancakes, Friday movie nights, impromptu camping trips. And slowly, I began to heal. The lake, once a symbol of betrayal, became a place of peace. I'd sit on the dock in the evenings, watching the sun dip below the horizon, and feel a sense of quiet resolve. Rebecca's betrayal changed me, but it didn't define me. In the end, it gave me something I hadn't realized I'd lost: the strength to choose myself, to walk away, and to start again. And for that, I was grateful.